morning, MPC. Welcome sa ating weekly economic briefing. Kasama na natin si Assistant Secretary Tony Lambino.
Salamat, Yusek Rocky. Magandang umaga po sa lahat at welcome sa ating kauna-unahang weekly economic press briefing para sa taong 2020, co-organized by the Economic Development Cluster and PCOO. Nilagdaan ni Pangulong Rodrigo Roa Duterte ang Republic Act 11465 o ang General Appropriations Act for 2020 noong isang araw. Napakahalaga po ng pagpasa ng budget para sa agarang pagpapatupad ng mga programa at serbisyo ng pamahalaan para sa ating mga kababayan. Malaking bahagi ng pinirmahang 2020 budget ang nakalaan sa edukasyon, healthcare, housing at social welfare na kumakatawan sa 36% ng kabuuang naaprubahang pondo, samantalang 29% naman ay mapupunta sa infrastruktura, turismo, kalakalan at paggawa ng karagdagang trabaho para sa mga Pilipino. Ang inaprubahang 4.1 trillion budget ay kumakatawan sa halos 20% ng ating GDP para sa taong 2020 na siyang susuporta sa infrastruktura, human capital development, peace and order at maging ang mga reforma ng Administrasyong Duterte sa ilalim ng 0 to 10-point socio-economic agenda. Ito ay inaasahang magpapalakas ng patuloy na paglago ng ating ekonomiya, maging ang hakbang ng pamahalaan tungo sa pagkamit ng 6.5 to 7.5 GDP growth sa taong ito at maibaba ang poverty incidence sa 14% sa taong 2020. Tinatayang aabot sa 1 milyong Pilipino ang maiaahon sa kahirapan kada taon hanggang 2020 at inaasahang maiibsan ang extreme poverty sa bansa pagdating ng 2040 na siyang nakaangkla sa ambisyon natin 2040. Upang talakayin ang nilalaman ng 2020 national budget, mga priority investments ng gobyerno na nilagdaan ng ating Pangulo noong Lunes at kung paano ito makakatulong sa adhikain ng administrasyon para sa isang mapayapa at maunlad na bansa. Kasama po natin sina Assistant Secretary Rolando Toledo, Director Ryan Dita at Director Gerald Handa ng Department of Budget and Management. Asek Rolly.
Maraming salamat, Asek Tony. Good morning to everyone and Happy New Year. Okay, on behalf of the Department of Budget and Management, I'm here to present to you the overview of the national budget for fiscal year 2020 with the theme continuing the journey to a more peaceful and progressive Philippines. So the fiscal year 2020 General Appropriations Act amounting to 4.1 trillion was signed into law by the President last January 6, 2020. It is the same level as the proposed budget submitted to Congress last year and is equivalent to 19.5% of projected gross domestic product. When compared to the budget for fiscal year 2019, the budget for fiscal year is larger by 12%, making it the country's largest budget to date. With this, the government aims to support landmark programs and projects on infrastructure and human development, as well as the implementation of game-changing reforms to accelerate economic growth, poverty reduction, and job generation. Furthermore, the 2020 GAA follows a cash budgeting system wherein obligation disbursement to goods delivered and services rendered, inspected, and accepted shall be made within the current fiscal year. Now, this slide will illustrate the budget dimensions by expense class. So here, we see that the largest portion of the fiscal year 2020 budget is allotted for maintenance and other operating expenditure, or MOE, we call it MOE, amounting to approximately 1.633 trillion or 39.84% of the budget. The second largest portion of the 2020 budget covers expense under personnel services or PS, amounting to 1.184 trillion or 28.9% of total budget. Meanwhile, 20.23 of the budget amounting to 829.4 billion shall cover expenses for capital outlays or CO. And lastly, 452.4 billion or 11.03 of the total budget is allocated for financial expenses. I would just like to note that the MOE, if you know, the maintenance is the biggest portion, includes there the allocation for local government units, which is inclusive of internal revenue allotment, special shares, and the process of national taxes to local government support fund. Now, the next slide will show us, illustrate the dimension of the fiscal year 2020 budget by sector. So the sectoral allocation of the fiscal year 2020 President's budget is consistent with the development priorities of the administration, namely infrastructure and human capital development. 36.5% of the budget amounting to 1.495 trillion is allotted to social services. This will fund programs and projects for education, health, social welfare, and housing that will help uplift the lives of all Filipinos, especially the poor and vulnerable. Next, 29.3% of the budget amounting to 1.2 trillion will cover economic services. This aims to boost the country's economy through increased investment in infrastructure, tourism, trade, and agriculture, as well as intensified generation of quality jobs, among others. Third, 18.2% of the budget amounting to 746.7 billion shall cover the general public services, which will primarily ensure the preservation of public order and safety and sound, fair, and efficient management of our fiscal resources, among others. Fourth, 11.2% of the budget amounting to 461 billion is allotted to cover interest payments on local and foreign debts as well as net lending. And lastly, 4.8% of the budget amounting to 197.4 billion will be used for the country's defense efforts to ensure the peace and security of the country through the implementation of security reforms and modernization of the armed forces, among others. Meanwhile, this will show us the top 10 departments with the highest budget allocation. So this is to fund for the priority programs and project. Now, consistent with the administration's priorities, the Department of Education, state universities and colleges, Commission on Higher Education, and the Technical Education Skills Development Authority collectively will receive the largest portion of the 2020 budget to the tune of 692.6 billion or 16.89% of the total budget. This will be followed by the Department of Public Works and Highways at 581.7 billion or 14.19% of the total budget. Now, the total Department of Interior and Local Government will receive 241.6 billion, of which 78% will go to the Philippine National Police. The Department of Social Welfare and Development will also receive an increase in its budget, taking 200.5 billion or 12.7 more year on year. So the budget includes 36.5 billion lodged under the Land Bank of the Philippines for the unconditional cash transfer. The Department of National Defense will take the fifth largest portion at 192.1 billion. This is followed by the Department of Health with a budget of 175.9 billion. Seventh, the Department of Transportation will receive 100.6 billion or 2.45% of the total budget. You will note that this has an increase of 45%, basically for the 45%, basically for the allocation for our mostly the railway projects. The Department of Agriculture will receive 64.7 billion or 1.58% of the total budget, and the ninth largest portion will be received by the judiciary, which is 41.2 billion, and lastly, the 10th largest portion will be received by the Department of Environment and Natural Resources at 26.4 billion pesos. Now, the social services sector accounts for the largest bulk of the budget to fund human capital development programs in education, health, and social protection. Such programs include the universal access for quality tertiary education, that is 39 billion, the basic education facilities program, that's 36 billion, The Universal Healthcare Program, 172.4 billion. The Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program, 108.8 billion. And the Unconditional Cash Transfer Program, among others. Among others. Now, uh, for the universal health, the education, universal access to quality tertiary education will support students covered by the free higher education, free technical vocational education and training, tertiary education subsidy, and student loan program of the Commission on Higher Education. Okay. Uh, Now we'll go to the next spending priorities, which is the infra spending. For the infra spending, 1.2 trillion is allotted for economic service, which corresponds to 29.3% of national budget. For infrastructure development, in particular, the Department of Public Works and Highways and the Department of Transportation will receive significantly higher allotments in 2020 to accelerate the administration's infrastructure program, taking 581.7 billion and 100.6 billion respectively for 2020. Of these amounts, the DPWH will use 203.8 billion for its network development program, asset prevention program, and bridge program. Meanwhile, the DOTR will use 63.5 billion to develop the country's rail, air, and sea transportation infrastructure. These programs will enhance the state of physical infrastructure to facilitate the flow of goods, services, and people in all areas of the country. Now, the fiscal year 2020 national budget also covers the agricultural needs of our country with select programs shown in this slide. Okay, included in the select program are irrigation development with a budget of 37.7 billion, farm to market roads with 10 billion, support to farmers and fisher folks with 20 billion, the rice competitiveness enhancement fund with 10 billion and 3 billion as financial subsidy for rice to rice farmers. Now, the fiscal year 2020 national budget also includes significant allocation to enhance peace and order in the country. So the administration will continue to actively combat terrorism and maintain national sovereignty. So in particular, the Department of National Defense will receive 192 billion while the Philippine National Police will receive 187.3 billion. So moreover, some 70.6 billion will be allocated for the operational and developmental needs of Bangsamoro Autonomous Region and Muslim Mindanao. Okay, so I guess that's all. Thank you very much, and we can take your questions.
Okay, MPC, my question. Jillian, microphone, please.
Sir, good morning.
Good morning.
This year, we're gonna use a cash budgeting system again, correct po?
Yeah.
Last year, that was the first time this system was being used. What is the DBM's assessment regarding the use of this system? And if ever there are problems, how are we gonna avoid it in this 2020 national budget? Thank you.
Yes, it's true that we're using already the cash-based budgeting starting 2019, and moving forward, we'll be using the cash-based budgeting system for 2020 onwards. Yeah, so far we see that the cash-based budgeting system improves spending as far as the projects and implementation of programs and projects, because with this cash budgeting system, government agencies or implementing agencies are required to, of course, deliver the projects to deliver the projects and pay the projects within the fiscal year. So meaning to say, it improves the absorptive capacity of the agency. You will see in this probably comes next month for the utilization of funds as far as the program disbursement has basically achieved our program. So that's basically what the cash-based budgeting has done a lot for us in terms of spending our budget. And of course, spending the budget uh, will, of course, improve the performance of the agency in terms of implementation of programs and projects.
Questions? Joseph?
So I was wondering whether we are aware already of the mandatory evacuation order of the president, and do we have the money to bring back our
Yeah.
people?
Yeah, that was mentioned during the signing of the GAA last Monday. It was mentioned that, yeah, in light of the ongoing rising tension between the U.S. and Iran, the president called for the preparation of a standby funds for the possible preparation of the Filipino overseas workers in the Middle East. And you will say that the data from the Philippine Statistics Authority show that 1.26 million Filipinos are working in Bahrain, Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Should the situation of the region erupt into conflict, the president is instructed to immediately evacuate all Filipinos. So, given that, as a matter of fact, we have provided in the budget already, even without that, we have set already funds for the repatriation of our Filipino overseas workers. In the DFA budget, we have some allocation of 129 billion. In the OWA budget, we have a
Slow down a bit.
1.29 billion.
Could you slow down a little bit, sir?
Sorry, 1.29 billion in the DFA budget. We also have an allocation of 100 million in the OWA budget. And we have also some funds that we can tap under the OWA fund. I understand there was a free fund around 500 million pesos. So even without with the pronouncement of the president, we already have the budget for the repatriation.
So you have already 1.8 billion? 1.2, 100, and 500. Any ba
Alright,
lang? Mali.
yes.
Billion pala yung isa.
Yeah.
So magkano sir ang total? 1.8? 1.8?
129.
Amazon major. So. 1.9.
1.8.
All right.
1.8. 1.8 billion.
Do you think this is enough? Because
Well,
the president is calling for a special session for Congress.
yeah. If will not be enough, I understand we have also a standby fund that is we can tap that is subject to approval of the president, which is the contingent fund. And other than that, I guess the Department of Finance is looking into the possible sources of such fund from other sources. But as of now, we don't have yet the figure of how much can we collect. Determine how much is the amount that we can have for this.
The contingent fund is under the OP or some other agencies?
It's a lump sum fund, but that is subject to the approval by the president.
Do you have the number? Wala ba?
We have a 13 billion allocation for that contingent fund, but there are also some earmark, or rather not earmark, but some programs and projects or activities that
Naka-budget na ibig sabihin.
to be. One is for additional expenses for the travel of the president if there's a need to top the contingent fund, and then the other one if there's an urgent new requirements, especially when there's a creation of a new department.
But bottom line, sir, is we have the money to bring them home.
Yes.
Can you have a soundbite for... Do we have the money to bring them home?
Of course, yes, we have money we stand by fund already the government is ready. If there's any for call for the repatriation of our overseas Filipino workers.
All right, sir, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, Director Handa or Director Lita, do you have additional, questions? MPC? No more. Laila?
Good morning, sir. Sir, in the President's budget message, there were several items under conditional implementation. Sir, what does this mean? Is this an indication that the use of the funds in the previous year had been problematic?
Let me answer that. Actually, in the 2020 GAA, there is no item that was directly vetoed by the President. Nevertheless, there are certain provisions that are recommended for conditional implementation and general observation just to ensure that their implementation is consistent with existing laws and policies. So there are various provisions that were included by Congress or revised, which needs to be clarified in a condition provided in the affirmation message uh, issued by the president, or to be issued in a guidelines by the implementing agencies such as the DBM and other concerned agencies.
Sir, so does this mean parang the item was not clear in the approved budget?
Um, you see, the GAA is a very broad document, so the details needs to be clarified in the implementing guidelines. So that's the purpose of the conditional implementation.
Uh, this doesn't mean that there was something questionable about the previous use of the fund?
Doesn't necessarily mean. It just means that there's details that have to be clarified in the issuance or in the guidelines to be provided.
Thank you.
Okay, questions? MPC? Wala na Bernadette.
Sir, on the government pay hike, the SSL 5, may we know when are we expecting the president to sign the SSL 5?
Director Handa.
Yes, ma'am. The enrolled bill on the proposed Salary Standardization Law 5 has already been submitted to the Office of the President for evaluation and approval. And once signed into law, the first tranche of the increase in the salary of government workers will take effect starting January 1, 2020. And we have already provided in the 2020 GAA certain amount for the implementation of this under the Miscellaneous Personnel Benefits Fund.
Can we expect the signing of the SSL 5 within the week, sir?
We will coordinate with the Office of the President, but rest assured that the enrolled copy of the SSL 5 is already with the Office of the President for approval and signature, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, questions? MPC. Joseph?
Sir, do you in-extend yung sa 2019, yung ibang projects? Do you have the details right now of what kind of projects these are and how much?
Available appropriations,
Okay.
including PS.
Yeah, so in general, all available appropriations, including PS, could still be continued up to 2020. So right now, we haven't determined yet how much is the balance of that, given that there's still agencies is still closing the books of they're closing their books still until February. Probably we will know the levels of how much is the balances that we can do.
Thank you.
Okay, no more questions? MPC. Jillian?
Has the 2019 budget been already fully obligated? Because as of November, I think, or December, mga 98% na yung
Okay.
obligation percentage niya.
Okay. So I think the one you mentioned is 98% is the one we've released already from the DBM, but not necessarily obligated by the agencies. So yes, it's not yet fully obligated because, as you will know, 98% was released only as an allotment, but we'll still have to have that continue. Given the fact that it's a continuing appropriation up till 2020, then it's not yet fully obligated.
Question lang po. So, how will this extension of the 2019 validity be? Will the government agencies prioritize first yung 2019 projects before they move on to the 2020 projects and spending? Could you have clarification on that lang po?
Okay. Kung ako yung ahensya, ipaprioritize ko syempre yung nakaraang budget kasi that will lapse up to in the 2020. While of course the 2020 budget of course will still be kumbaga implement yan following the implementation of those continuing appropriations from the 2019 budget. So yun yung if I'm the agency. So yes, dapat i-prioritize nila yung 2019 budget na continuing appropriations.
It can be, pero you can do both 2019 and 2020 projects simultaneously.
Yes, of course. Yes. Because 2020 is a new appropriations and sinasabi doon sa budget natin that the implementation of these projects is from January to December of the 2020 as much as possible. With the cash budgeting system, we're encouraging agencies, of course, to implement their projects within a given period or a given fiscal year.
Okay, Arian?
Hi, sir. Sir, I understand that the president did not veto any part of the 2020 national budget. Does this mean to say that everything in our 2020 budget is constitutional?
Um, Based on the review by the DBM, we didn't find any item of appropriation provision or proviso that is strongly objectionable vis-a-vis existing laws and policies, and which cannot be addressed by conditional implementation or general observation.
Okay, sir. So the DBM did not recommend any item for veto.
Yes.
Okay. And sir, yesterday, Senator Lacson said that he submitted to the DBM a list of highly questionable line items. Sabi niya, sir, he wants it reviewed, and he said that a conditional implementation has the effect of a veto. Is this, for the record, is a yung conditional implementation po ba has the effect of a veto?
Well, it's part of the legislative process since the president issued the affirmation message containing the conditional implementation. It specifies the conditions in the implementation of a provision or a proviso, including the requirement for the issuance of guidelines for the proper implementation of a provision. So it's deemed part of the General Appropriations Act.
Pero sir, yung mga under conditional implementation po ba, are those questionable? Kasi bakit po sila conditional?
Well, the DBM in the exercise of its function needs to be to ensure that the release of funds are in accordance with laws and policies. So the guidelines needs to be detailed in the conditional implementation.
But that does not mean to say na questionable yung
Well,
items na yon.
It addresses some issues that needs to be clarified. So in effect, it prevents the release of funds to be questionable.
Okay, sir. And sir, last na lang po, will the DBM review yung list na sinubmit po ni Senator Lacson? Natanggap na po ba ng DBM?
Well, personally, I have no knowledge about the list.
But if matanggap na po ng DBM, will you review it po?
Yeah, I guess we have to look into it, and we will know if it merits, or rather, the value for that, and then merits. Well, I don't think, given the fact that it's already signed by the president, and there's a value for that to change, or rather, have the rather say magbabago pa. I don't think we can do that now because it's already signed by the president.
So, bale sir, useless na rin po. Is that what you're trying to say?
I think
Already signed it.
I think as you stated a while ago, there's nothing that cannot be addressed by the conditional implementation or general observation that will be issued for the purpose.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay. No more questions, MPC? Okay, thank you. Thank you, MPC. Thank you, ASEC Toledo, Director Handa, and Director Lita, and ASEC Lambino. Thank you, MPC. Back to our main studio sa People's Television Network.